Hi, and welcome to Marketplace Tech's limited series, Decoding Democracy. I'm your host, Kimberly Adams. Over the next few months, we'll be exploring how technology is changing how we participate in the 2024 general election. Today, we'll be discussing what online misinformation narratives have emerged in this election cycle so far, and what voters need to keep in mind before they turn in their ballots. So to help us with that, I'm joined by Dr. Danielle Lee Thompson, a research manager at the Center for an Informed Public at the University of Washington. Danielle, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Kimberly.
I wanted to start with one of the more prominent online misinformation narratives that the Center for an Informed Public has been flagging, which is this concept that non-citizen voting is a relatively common thing or a big risk for the election. What are you seeing about that?
Yeah, so thank you so much. At the Center for an Informed Public, we study online rumors. So a rumor often can be true, it can be false, or it can use a kernel of the truth somewhere in between. With non-citizen voting, oftentimes what we're seeing is something called evidence generation. Now, evidence generation is where you have a photo, a video, or a claim that folks use to push a narrative. And in the case of non-citizen voting, we're seeing a lot of this. So what is often happening, you might see certain organizations, whether it's the Heritage Foundation or True the Vote, that are collecting videos that they claim are evidence of non-citizen voting in the United States. Now, this can be spun up to claim, oh my goodness, look at all these people who shouldn't be voting and who are voting, and this could swing the election in a certain direction. And so we've been seeing a lot of evidence of this online. It just reported this week by the New York Times that the Heritage Foundation had been filming some folks undercover in Atlanta apartment complexes, or primarily Latinos, and speaking in Spanish, asking them if they were planning to vote or not. Now, a lot of the claims that were made were apparently debunked. But this is a big problem because it creates this idea that so many folks are voting. Finally, we have also seen voter roll purges in states. Now, we know that voter rolls are cleaned in between the election cycles for accounting for folks who have died, who have moved, who have changed their names. And in certain states like Ohio and Virginia, officials have been saying that, particularly Governor Youngkin in Virginia, that thousands of people were removed from the rolls who were non-citizen voters. All of this contributes to claims of, that this was evidence of systemic potential for voter fraud. And so we've been seeing a lot of this circulating across social media platforms that we monitor.
And just to be clear, the idea that this is a very prevalent thing is not true. There's not much evidence that this is meaningfully a trend that would swing an election at this point.
At the Center for an Informed Public, we study the rumors themselves, and from what other experts have told us, that these claims are overblown in the sense that they are not going to swing an election. Our election systems are very secure, and there are remedies when there are mistakes, such as when you do clean a voter roll and you catch someone who shouldn't be on there. That's the system working as it should. So these sorts of claims, yes, they are setting up this larger narrative potentially for the fall that that non-citizens are voting. And this is also attached to a larger narrative of mass numbers of folks crossing the border, the southern border, illegally.
So you mentioned the consequence of sort of undermining trust in the election and the voter purges and things like that. But what are some of the other consequences of just sort of normal people hearing about this and amplifying these rumors when they're either overblown or untrue?
Well, rumors can lead to false information about where to vote or how to vote and all sorts of things. So it can lead to a form of disenfranchisement, right? The second thing, false rumors, such as ones about non-citizen voting, can erode trust in election results and erode trust in our democracy itself. Thirdly, when you have these rumors or these narratives that non-citizen voting is happening at a large scale, and a certain party is responsible for registering them. You might get examples right now, for instance, with the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton targeting certain Democratic counties down there, saying that their mailing of voter registration forms could confuse non-citizens and induce them to fraudulently register. And then he executed search warrants on Get Out the Vote organizations. I believe it was Get Out the Vote organizations. So these sorts of narratives can have both impact on regular folks who on their trust in our election system, and they can also fuel serve as evidence for other kinds of officials to take action.
We live in a very different media ecosystem than we did the last presidential race back in 2020, where maybe you had Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but now with TikTok and so much more social video, how is that affecting the ability of rumors like these to spread online?
Yes. So, I want to say, just speaking as a researcher, the ability to research these platforms has changed on our end. In the past 2 election cycles, we had tools like CrowdTangle to explore the Meta suite. And we also had greater access to X's API to study how rumors were emerging on these platforms. Those tools and that access has changed. And so Meta, for instance, has shut down CrowdTangle. So the ability to track rumors across platforms is different. Now, we also, in this election cycle, we see more folks using TikTok. Again, evidence generation, as I brought up at the beginning of this segment, you'll have more videos, more long form conversations, particularly on TikTok, which might chop up podcasts such as this one, repost them online, and folks sort of are not just looking at like one single piece of information, but a whole story about that piece of information. That's what we see oftentimes on TikTok. So yes, it is true. Depending on what kind of community you're in or what you're interested in, you might be using different kinds of social media platforms. It's much more diffuse. It is much broader than it had been maybe in previous times where all the journalists or so were on X, or formerly known as Twitter. So yes, the nature of the information environment has changed.
So what advice do you have for folks if maybe they do see a piece of this rumor popping up on their timeline or in their feed, this idea of a piece of evidence that non-citizens are voting in the election?
Yes. So the first thing we have to remember is about context. One image, one video, one claim taken out of context and put on social media might not tell the whole truth. As we said before, rumors, and we see rumors across the partisan spectrum, across the sort of spectrum of veracity, right? Rumors can be true, they can be false, or they can be somewhere in between. And so we want to remind folks to slow down, to not take one piece of evidence as a whole truth, that it could be couched in a narrative that may, for instance, be used to persuade you to believe something about an election, a candidate, our democracy itself. So slow down, remember that one piece of evidence is not the whole truth. And also finally, remember that the truth travels slower than social media. So on election day, folks might be very quick to claim or call something. Best to go to bed, wait till the next days as votes are counted, because it does take time, because we do have secure elections. Every vote can get counted and recounted. And we really want to make sure that we're not jumping to conclusions.
Really good tips there. Thank you so much, Danielle Lee Thompson with the Center for an Informed Public. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Kimberly.
And thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Decoding Democracy. If you have any stories you'd like to share about voting in this election, we would love to hear from you. You can leave a comment below. And of course, if you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. Daniel Shin produced this episode, and I'm Kimberly Adams.